So, what I wanted to talk to you about on your sandwich list here, you said that you only place things that you had personal opinions on, which means I assume things that you've had before.
Yes. Yes.
There is a distinct lack of liverwurst on your list.
Which I have not had liverwurst, but I can only assume if it's the got worst in the name, it can't be good.
Hello, friendos. This is Shane, welcoming you back to Chain of Commander. And for this month's visit to the recruitment office, we have an incredibly special guest to join us today. Somebody who I think I've played with you like twice now. I want to say
At least once.
At least once. Twice is more than once. So those two sentences they work well together. But that said, enough of me rambling. Let's have our guest introduce himself today here.
Yeah, I'm Peter, otherwise known as Mono White Border on Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I post just a ton about not only Mono White, but also a lot about Mono White Border now.
Yeah, you've been working on that Mono White deck on Black Blade list, right?
It's we're down to the basics. After I have the basics done, then that deck will be ready to actually be put into paper and put into action.
And I've been voting on every basic post you put
Awesome.
so far, and everyone I choose has been coming in second. So, woo!
Of course.
Consolation prize. All right, and which deck did you bring for us to talk about today?
All right, today I brought the first ever mono white deck I built on this 2-year mono white journey that I've been on, which is Sram Senior Edificer.
Sram.
Yeah.
All right, Sram. He's the guy. He's 1 and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature dwarf advisor. And whenever you cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle spell, draw a card. And I think this guy was originally from the first half of the Kaladesh block,
Correct.
so from Kaladesh itself. Mm-hmm. All right, so why Sram?
So my mono white journey started because I had 2 different playgroups that I played with. I had the playgroup I played with at college, and then I had the playgroup that I played with from my hometown. And they were about an hour away from each other, so I could play with both pretty regularly. And my playgroup from college were really into heavy theme decks. If you ever play with me, I have like Skeleton Tribal, I have Dwarf Tribal. We're super into these really heavy theme decks. One of us has Cleric Tribal. There's another with Phyrexian Tribal, Rebel Tribal. Like we get super into either Vorthos themes or tribal themes in our deck building. So when you take that to my other group that's a little bit more on the competitive side, not CEDH, but they're building to build a good version of their deck, I found that it was creating games that were just 3-player games, and then me sitting to the side of the table having a fun time playing my skeletons, which was fun for me, but it created a miserable environment for the other 3 because it just became a 3-player format, and Commander just doesn't work for 3 players. So I wanted a restriction, and but I also needed something that I could kind of build good and would still be a challenge enough for me to enjoy. So that's why I built Mono White. And then I picked Sram because Mono White can't draw cards, and there's a commander that says draw a card. So obviously I got to do that just to be dissident.
I mean, it brings the deck together and keeps it competitive.
Right.
So what angle did you take with Sram? Because he likes several things. He likes auras, he likes equipments, he likes vehicles, but obviously I'm kind of going over the list here. There really only seems to be one of those things in this deck.
Yep. I call it Sram-O-Mancers because this Sram list is built into auras. I didn't want to do equipment. My philosophy when I build a deck is play as much magic as you can, which the equipment idea with Sram was a little bit too combo-y for me. So I was afraid that I was either going to play a really fast game with my combo strategy or have nothing to do because none of my artifacts do anything because they're all 0 mana artifacts or whatever. And then it was between auras and vehicles, and auras has a lot more shenanigans that you can kind of do. Vehicles just didn't allure me, so I delved into auras to get my synergy with Sram. And that's also where I found my love for just all shenanigans aura related, because auras are this really frowned upon subtype in Magic because their inherent card disadvantage. If your creature dies and it had an aura on it, well, now you lose 2 cards and your opponent only spent 1. And
True.
so now I've given myself 2 challenges. I have to build a mono white deck that can actually do something, and I have to build a mono white deck with auras that can actually do something. Sram helps with that though. Sram turns your auras into card advantage, especially if you're using something like a Flickering Ward or a Shackles that can bounce to your hand, and then you can recast it and get additional draws off a single card.
Yeah, and as Wizards has been kind of noticing the whole inherent issue with auras being card disadvantage, they've been working with kind of design mechanics that let you actually redeem some value out of an aura once it goes to the graveyard, whether it goes back to your hand or you can draw a card when it leaves the battlefield or you get a creature out of it. They've been starting to expand that. So a deck like this, as Wizards explores those design spaces more, can only get a little bit cooler, maybe a little bit more consistent, or at least more value out of each individual card you play.
Right. 2 years ago would be 2019, which was a year before Theros Beyond Death came out. And if you look at the list now, there's a ton of cards from Theros Beyond Death included in it, even down to commons and uncommons.
Yeah, I also have an Enchantress build, not mono white, it's Tuvasa, but that set was just like, all right, I'm just gonna pump everything into this deck here. So out of all the auras you do play, I'm seeing there's 20, I want to say roughly 22, maybe 21.
Yeah, because there's some
an amount.
Yeah, there's some generic enchantments in there. I'm probably in the 18 to 20 range now.
Okay. Which ones are like the star auras from this deck here? Which ones are the cream of the crop?
So, okay, my favorite ones, Bound by Moonsilver is up there as a favorite because it's just so weird. It has an ability that is sacrifice another permanent to attach Bound by Moonsilver to another target creature. You can only activate it once. You can only activate at sorcery speed, but what you do is you use it to sacrifice your other auras, like Cessation, which when it's put into a graveyard comes back to it comes back to your hand, and then you get another trigger off Sram. So that's like a weird combo that I get giddy about. That's really awkward and niche, and it doesn't have a huge effect. But you're taking a bunch of steps to just draw an extra card and make a different creature not able to attack. So that's what I'm all about. Flickering Ward is. Oh, go ahead.
I was about to say, I really like Bound by Moonsilver because, one of my issues with pacifism is that, if you use it early, something bigger is going to come along. But Bound by Moonsilver, it gives you a chance to adjust as the board state deems accordingly. So that is definitely a card that I don't think people see enough of in EDH. That is definitely a really good card, especially on a budget.
Yeah, if you're in an aura deck, because Sram has a little bit of tension with pacifism effects. You want to cast him to draw the card, but you don't want to cast it on a 2/2. Bound by Moonsilver kind of gets around that. The recast All-Stars are Flickering Ward, which is pay a white to enchant a creature, give it protection, and then you pay another white and return Flickering Ward to its owner's hand. Along with Shackles, which has the same ability, it's just on a 3 cost. I used to play Cage of Hands, which was another thing that did that, but that got taken out, I believe, for Sentinel's Eyes, which has Escape, so I can recast it for my graveyard for 1.
That is true.
And then, those are pretty normal Sram techs, but I gotta say, one of my weirder aura techs in this deck that probably you would look at it and you wouldn't understand why it's in the deck is Weight of Consciousness, which has enchanted creature can't attack for 1 and a white, but it has this extra ability that says tap 2 untapped creatures you control, share a creature type, remove enchanted creature from the game, which is a very strange way to exile something and plays into an ordinarily probably large number of creatures in this deck. There's actually more creatures in the decks than auras. Because while it is an Aura Sram deck, it is also a Cleric Wizard Tribal deck. Because I just couldn't help myself when I was building this initial list. I said at the beginning that my group was really into tribal decks. I still love tribal decks, though I haven't been building as many tribal decks of late. But Sram was, once again, that first Devi into mono white, building something competitive, and I still wanted to bring that tribal to it. And then for a long time, I'd had this thing where I wanted to see how many tribes I could fit into a deck. So this was my first foray. I just did 2 tribes. I did wizards and clerics because
you may have intended it only to be 2 tribes, but I'm going over the list. There are a lot of humans in here as well.
Yeah, and Sram being a human helps that too. I've definitely used Weight of Consciousness with human, but when I was looking through what I wanted the creatures to be, I just kind of was perusing. I didn't really have a goal for the deck, and I just noticed a ton of the synergies with auras in white are coincidentally wizards. So you have Aura-Mancer, you have what's my other one? Core Spirit Dancer, Kitsune Mystic, which is just one of those awesome Kamigawa flip cards.
Yep, that's the one that. Oh no, this is. I'm thinking of the other one. This is the one that when it flips over, move target enchantment, enchanting a creature to another creature. Oh, and you could do that at instant speed too, and just start moving around all your auras as you deem fit.
Yeah, you just move around your pacifisms or whatever. So sometimes the correct play is to enchant your Kitsune Mystic with all these weird auras, and then flip it, and then just start passing them around.
Just passing them around.
And then
that is amazing.
And Umbra Mystic is also a wizard, and that's like you gotta play. They're all cards that are those kind of. Well, I'm playing enchantments, I'm playing auras. Like I definitely want to include these cards. So all right, I've already got the workings of a tribe, but there aren't quite enough wizards. And there's quite a few clerics that also synergize with auras. Starfield Mystic synergizes with auras. Let's pick out what's another guy here. Heliod's Pilgrim synergizes with auras. So there's plenty of clerics that also synergize with auras. And then the piece de resistance to this whole shebang was the fact that an onslaught block, the tribal combo, because they do this a lot. They were always trying to figure out, all right, you're in a tribal set, they want to pair up 2 tribes. So in Lorwyn, you saw a lot of cards that, like, it's a giant that cares about having Kithkin or something like that. In Onslaught, the mono white pairing were wizard and cleric. So you have Shield Mage Elder, which has 2 different abilities. You can tap 2 untapped clerics you control to prevent all damage target creature would deal this turn, or tap 2 untapped wizards you control to prevent all damage target spell would deal this turn on a 6 mana 2/3. And the art is fantastic. It's got the old border. It's from Onslaught block. It's super weird, super niche, and it fits perfectly into this deck. So of course I play it. And believe it or not, it is actually won me a game. I was able to use the tap 2 wizards part of it to prevent damage from a spell and then swing in for lethal. And the person had no idea it was coming because of that just irrelevant 6 mana creature I played and laughed at when I played.
All right, these are the kind of cards I live in this Commander world for. Is like, I've never heard of this card before today. I've never seen it. I personally would look at it and be like, I don't see it, but you saw it. You saw it, and you applied it, and that is just absolutely amazing. Now, going over the rest of the creatures here, I do see a little bit of a dark side of white here. I see a decent amount of stacks effects in this deck. You have the Maguses of the Tabernacle and of the Disc, and you got the stuff that just the one that makes all the artifacts cost 1 at their upkeep. Was that to kind of hedge against your more powerful friends?
Right. I don't call them stacks pieces. I call them proactive answers. Right? They're just an answer I played before the problem came out. So
yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, definitely. So Magus of the Tabernacle, Magus of the Disc, and Magus of the Balance. Magus of the Balance, when I delved into white, like the first thing I wanted to do was find all the balance effects, because that's the automatic way to reset the supposed lack of ramp that you see in mono white. So, okay, if I'm only at 5 lands and everyone else is at 10, I'll just bring everyone back down to 5 lands. And that just helped that those 3 Maguses were a wizard on them. Now, Magus of the Tabernacle, I actually put in there just because I really like the art, and he's a wizard. The effect is fine, and it as a hedge against token abilities, but Onslaught block had a ton of these clerics that had this like wicker armor, and it's just the coolest looking thing to me. I just absolutely adore the wicker armor. So yeah, Magus of the Tabernacle is just purely in there as this dude looks really cool kind of play. Him being a 2/6 though is pretty relevant. 4 mana 2/6 is a lot of toughness to get through.
A lot of blocks to go on.
Yeah.
There. All right. This deck is just so neat. This is not something I personally would have been able to create. And I could just sit here in awe looking at it for like the next half hour, but I don't think that would be entertaining videos at all. So you went over the creatures, you went over the auras. I do notice it's a little bit low in terms of instant speed interaction for anything. Source of Plowshares being the only thing you got there, but it is loaded on board clears. Got Dawn to Dusk, Hour of Revelation, Planar Cleansing. I see a personal favorite of mine in this deck, Planar Collapse. Love that card.
Oh yeah, Planar Collapse is insanely good with the addition of Heliod, Hall of Heliod's Generosity. So you just, as soon as your board wipe goes off, if you want to get it back, you can get it back really quick. And then it's a 2-mana board wipe that's just locked and ready to go. And you have things like Fountain Watch that gives it Shroud so that it can't really be targeted. So if you want to destroy it, you got to destroy everything. Which is good for me. That's exactly what I wanted.
No. I feel like a lot of people sleep on Planar Collapse, and I just love that card. Definitely in my list of pet cards. But yeah, I think that just leaves the land base here, and being in a monocolored deck, the mana base seems pretty fine. I see you got mainly plains, obviously, but you got a good desert package. I'm a big fan of a desert package, having Scavenger Grounds and the 2 associated white-producing deserts. You got Arch of Raska and Mikokoro for draw. You got Karoo. Right, that's the one that you can then...
You bounce it and it makes 2
land.
mana instead of just 1 mana.
And then, as you said, Hall of Heliod's Generosity. So, pretty straightforward. You got utility in your lands, but I don't see this deck running into a lot of mana issues or fixing issues all too often.
Yeah, and I run 37 lands. I kind of set my default at 38, even though I'm not sure what the consensus is yet on if 38's comfortable with a lot of free mulligans that playgroups do, but is 38 still too low technically? Like, looking at, now that I've been on Moxfield gives you a likelihood of drawing certain number of lands in your opening hand, and this one's 2.62, which makes me a little nervous, because normally I like having 3 lands in my opening hand. Now,
I sit at 37 is kind of where I end up with a lot of lands, between 35 and 37, depending on how much ramp. So
that's what
37, 38, that feels like a good zone, especially if you don't have a lot of card draw.
And Sram's great because he lands on turn 2, and you're just gonna start drawing cards right away. So you're gonna hit your land drops. It's funny I say that, and the last time I actually got to play Sram, I had a lot of trouble. I drew the most cards in that game. I think I drew close to like 30 or 40 cards, and I had like 6 lands on the table. It was really awkward.
I mean, it's on the whole, the deck's curve is pretty low. There's
Right.
very few things above 6 in here. So
I could play the game very effectively. It's just I decided to spend my turns drawing cards instead of being proactive and doing something, so I just fell behind on board eventually.
Yeah, that's always a trap. I also like drawing cards, and sometimes I spend too much time drawing cards instead of, doing things.
I can't say I didn't have fun drawing all those cards.
This is great! Keep going!
Oh, I lost?
I didn't do anything. I don't care.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So at this point, now that you gave us a very nice, all-inclusive, very thorough review of this deck, I want you to look directly at your camera, say hi to the folks at home, and give one last pitch why Sram-O-Mancers might want to be on their radar when it comes to a possible EDH deck.
Well, if you're...
Ooh, kitty. Oh, kitty's gone.
Bye, kitty. If you're looking for a mono white deck that draws a bunch of cards, but isn't obnoxiously oppressive and will always give you something to do at the end of the day, whether it's at the beginning of the game or late into the game, you're always going to have choices in place to make, then I would highly recommend taking a look at Sram-O-Mancers and letting it inspire you, or taking it for a spin yourself. And especially if you love pushing the tribal archetype, this specific list likes to play around with that too.
All right, and I'll include a link to his list down below so that you folks can just take a look at it, and you don't need to necessarily build that. You could just use it as a starting point and just tweak it the way you want. But Peter, where can the folks find you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much only on Twitter, at Mono Whiteboarder, and from there you can see a link to my blog. where I talk about a couple other of my mono white decks and the mono white deck I'm working on for 2020, which is Terranica. I call it my deck diary, and I'm just taking it week by week, upgrading it slowly, and you get to see all my thought process with each edition and each new card I add, and it's just cards that were printed in 2020 products. So
Ooh,
we're seeing,
okay, that is pretty
yeah,
cool.
it's what if mono white's getting better, it's exactly what we're being provided with to get better. I'm not reaching into the bag of the history of mono white. It's today, right now, can mono white do good stuff? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. No, and I don't know if you saw it, but recently I was on the Matadorks doing an interview with them on their channel, and they asked me to make a bold statement, and one of my bold statements was, I think white is going to become the second best color in the next 2 years. I think Wizards is starting to explore reasonable design space for it, and really starting to fill in the blanks of what they said white shouldn't be able to do by changing the ways they go about doing it. But that's a topic for another day. Peter, thank you very much for joining us today. Folks at home, he really is one of the most imaginative deck builders out there, and just following him on Twitter, seeing what he's up to, has been a highlight of my work days while I work at work. Don't tell my boss. Thank you all for joining us today, and I hope to see you folks again in the future.